It was another day of deal or no deal in Washington, this time with the paychecks of more than 80,000 federal employees on the line. And despite a unanimous vote in the Senate to approve a stopgap bill that would have kept the government fully functioning until February, this afternoon, it all fell apart.
We just had a very long, productive meeting with the president. The president informed us that he will not sign the bill that came over from the Senate last evening because of his legitimate concerns for border security.
That's right, the wall. So first, Trump demanded $5 billion in this budget deal to build the wall, or he'd, quote, proudly shut down the government. Then Tuesday, his administration backed off, saying they'd find the money some other way. Now you'd be forgiven if you have whiplash, because we seem to be back at square one with a deadline of just tomorrow night. So while the future of that wall is in question, Trump did get his way today on another Homeland Security policy he's been calling for, thanks to a new agreement with Mexico.
Effective immediately, the United States will begin the process of invoking Section 235(b)(2)(c) of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Once implemented, individuals arriving in or entering the United States from Mexico illegally or without proper documentation may be returned to Mexico for the duration of their immigration proceedings.
Trump's actions on immigration are just one problem, I guess, tonight has had with the current president in recent months. Attorney General Maura Healey has filed and signed on to dozens of lawsuits against the administration since he took office. And in fact, she just announced another one today. The Attorney General joins me now. It's nice to see you, Attorney General.
Good to be with you,
So what's
Jim.
this one about today that you announced? What are you doing?
Well, this is about making sure that we don't allow the drilling of oil and gas off our Atlantic waters. This is about making sure we don't have a Deepwater Horizon spill on the Atlantic seaboard that's going to decimate tourism, our ocean environment, a huge industry. You know, over $7 billion a year comes in through our fishing industry. Nearly 1 million jobs at issue. You know, it's a big deal. So I joined with states up and down the Atlantic seaboard to stop the Trump administration from going forward with a plan that would allow that kind of drilling off our coastal waters.
Do you have a form on your desk that says Massachusetts v. Trump, and you just fill in the blanks on the... I mean, how many lawsuits do you have against the Trump administration?
I don't know. I do know, though...
Dozens, I was right, isn't
there are many. And look, I think it's really important that we've been there to try to defend access to health care, to protect our environment, to protect students from predatory for-profit schools. On so many fronts, we've had to be there to step in, to do the job that the federal government should be doing, but isn't, and sometimes to take action against the federal government to keep them from doing things that are harmful to our economy, to our residents, to our states.
Speaking of the federal government, as you know, William Barr is his choice for Attorney General, his nominee. We learned today that Barr sent an unsolicited memo to the Justice Department earlier this year criticizing his, quote, fatally misconceived the special counsel's investigation. How can that man oversee Bob Mueller's work come next year, should it be confirmed?
That's a rhetorical question.
No, I'm serious.
No, I mean, it's the same scenario that we were dealing with Matt Whitaker. I mean, you have somebody who has demonstrated already explicitly that he is not going to be able to do his job with the kind of impartiality that one needs if they're going to oversee the United States Department of Justice. Just remember, Jim, even Jeff Sessions had the good sense to recuse himself from the Mueller investigation. Here we've got potentially an attorney general who's going to step in and oversee that, who's been explicit about his dislike and disdain of that investigation, and he's going to have control. To me, this has never been a partisan issue, Jim. It's been about standing up for the rule of law and ensuring that we have a Department of Justice that the public can have faith in, can have trust in.
You know, I'm sure you know your counterpart in Illinois, Lisa Madigan, the outgoing Attorney General, in the last 24 hours, issued a report saying the Catholic Church there withheld the names of at least 500 priests credibly accused of abuse of people. Last time we spoke to you on the radio, you said you were actively reviewing the situation in the church here. What are you doing?
Well, that continues. And given the nature of our review, I can't say much. But I will say this. You know, many years ago, the Attorney General's office under Tom Riley instituted an investigation following important investigative journalism by the Boston Globe that brought this really crisis to light. really proud of my colleagues in Illinois and in Pennsylvania and in other states that are now undertaking similar investigations and reviews. I've said from the beginning that I will do all within my power and authority to ensure that victims and survivors have a place to come forward, and also that the right measures are put in place so that there is a cultural change and there is accountability. Based on the latest reports, Jim, what it seems to me pretty clear is that Rome doesn't get it. And they are not getting direction from the top that is appropriate in terms of what needed to happen here, what should have already happened here. So my colleagues and I will continue to work with one another, stay in touch with one another on this, and certainly we're reviewing things here in Massachusetts.
Well, even if you can't get into the content, are you looking at any of the Massachusetts dioceses beyond the Boston Archdiocese? Because while we all know that we got information a while ago from here, even though a lot of advocates think it was wildly incomplete from the Boston Archdiocese, are you looking at the other dioceses around the Commonwealth?
We're going to be concerned with activity throughout the Commonwealth.
So is that going on now as we speak?
We've already been in touch with those archdioceses, with district attorneys' offices in those regions. And as I say, our review is ongoing. This is really important. I think a lot of people thought that we would have seen change in terms of practices and culture. And it's really disturbing in this day and age that some of this continues, it seems, to persist, at least in terms of potential cover-up or the withholding of information and names.
Speaking of cover-up or potential withholding of information, are you also looking into the issue of two letters, one about Cardinal McCarrick, now disgraced, one about a priest who was accused of sexual abuse in New Jersey? Two communications went to Cardinal O'Malley's office, both of which his secretary said he never showed to the cardinal. Obviously, that's what he says. Are you looking into whether or not that's true, as to whether or not this cardinal, who historically has been in charge of the Pontifical Commission of Abuse of Minors, that's not the formal name, are you looking into that as well?
Well, I think we looked at that issue a while back when it came to light. Well, I think that I accept what has been reported. What this points up, though, is a greater problem with culture and process, and that's really what we're focused on, I think, in our office. And as you see, this is not an issue limited to this state nor this country. Frankly, this really is a worldwide epidemic and crisis that still calls for accountability and resolution.
So you have concluded that the cardinal and his secretary have told the truth vis-a-vis those two letters?
Well, again, I wouldn't characterize our investigation into those particular issues as an investigation. I read and reviewed what was reported, and we're going to continue to look at this.
Okay, I want to talk to you about one other thing back home that we mentioned when Marjorie Egan and I did a debate with you and your Republican opponent, these so-called secret courts, which I'd never even heard of until the Globe reported on them. These are these courts that have closed-door hearings. There's no transcript. There's no public notice. It's a single court official who may not even be a lawyer. And for those who haven't been reading the Globe, a district court judge, Patricia Curtin, is on tape stealing a $4,000 Cartier watch from a conveyor belt at Logan, no charges. Jared Remy, 15, 16, 17 years ago, accused of threatening his girlfriend 13 years before he killed another girlfriend. No charges there either. On a current state senator who was a Brockton city councilor. Are you looking into this? Are you content with this notion that there's essentially this off-the-record court that has its own set of rules where often serious charges, drunk driving, threatening women, etc., stealing, are just thrown out and we never even hear about them were it not for the Globe?
Well, I think what's important here is that the trial courts are looking at this issue. There have been particular instances that certainly raise a lot of concerns and a lot of questions. I do think it's important, Jim, to keep in mind the whole context and what these clerk magistrate hearings are about. So I don't think you need to get rid of the entire process, to be honest with you. Is there a place for greater transparency and certainly the recording of information? Absolutely, and I think that's what I'd encourage the trial courts to consider.
What is okay of what currently exists? If you agree there should be a public record and transparency, so we know what happened in that room, what is okay about that? Why shouldn't it go through the normal judicial process, these kinds of things, serious charges against people?
Well, I mean, the public may not understand that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these proceedings around the state every day. Yeah. And so there's a role for a person who's actually not a judge but is a clerk magistrate who's been vetted and appointed and confirmed to carry out certain functions in the exercise of justice and in the administration of our criminal justice system. So I'm not advocating for abolishing that system. What I do think is important, Jim, and I think you'd agree with me, transparency, recording, the production of a record, and certainly no games being played with respect to individuals who are appearing before those persons.
You've obviously been, I was going to say, you've been in office almost 4 years. I think you knew that without my telling you. But in your 4 years, you spent a lot of time talking about the opioid crisis, as has the governor, and doing a lot of things. You indicted a doctor, I think it was from Drake, for allegedly illegally prescribing opioids to an at-risk patient. Beyond the merits of that case, which if you want to get into it's fine, but you don't need to, is that part of a strategy that goes beyond this individual doctor in terms of another avenue to deal with the opioid crisis, or is that a one-and-done kind of thing?
Well, I think that, here's what that case was about. We recently indicted a doctor for involuntary manslaughter because he prescribed opioids in different combinations, oxycodone, fentanyl, other drugs, to a patient with known issues, known instances of overdosing, who then died. We didn't take that action lightly. I think we had the evidence to support that indictment. We'll proceed with the prosecution. We haven't done many of those. We have taken action against some prescribers in the past, and where we see outliers, where we see people who are prescribing pills and putting people who are already in harm's way at further risk of illness and death, we'll take action. But I think my office has demonstrated a pretty broad-reaching strategy when it comes to the opioid epidemic. That's why we've sued Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. We're investigating manufacturers and distributors. We went after the maker of Narcan so that they made the price of Narcan more affordable. I'm spending a lot of time on issues related to treatment and education in our schools. So this is about attacking this problem from multiple angles. I recently received $3 million from the U.S. Department of Justice that will help fund our heroin and fentanyl trafficking enforcement efforts.
So since I know you have a lot more to say, why don't you join me on the radio with Marjorie Egan tomorrow at the library? You want to do that?
Sounds like a deal.
She'll be there. Maura Healey, it's great to see you.
Seeing you.
Attorney General of the Commonwealth again tomorrow on Boston Public Radio.